Hello, everyone. Tonight we are not rushing, not scrolling, not pretending everything is fine. Tonight, we are standing in the middle of a room that feels too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak in the floor, the kind that lingers long after the door has closed. There's a lamp glowing softly beside me, golden light, warm but a little lonely. Outside, the wind is brushing the window, soft like fingers, like someone trying to get in. And in here, it's just me. And this story. Because tonight, I want to talk about something that didn't break me all at once. It cracked. Slowly. Like a porcelain cup held too tight. Like a smile stretched too far. And when it finally shattered, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I do here. If these stories make you feel seen, or just less alone in the dark. I'd love to know you're out there. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, what time it is, even if it's just a whisper of a hello. I'll hear it. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan. Let it hum gently in the background, and let's start our journey tonight. I wish I could tell you there was a moment, one sharp, clear moment, when I realized I was always second place. But it doesn't work like that, does it? It's slower, quieter. It's a lifetime of being told. Let your sister go first. She's just younger, she needs more attention. You're the strong one. At first, I believed them. I thought love was something that shifted around like puzzle pieces. Sometimes you fit, sometimes you waited your turn. But I waited, and somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting to fit at all. My sister Claire, she's not cruel. She's just bright. Big laugh, big stories, big plans. The kind of person who fills up a room before you even notice the door opened. She was born with the world's applause already waiting. And me? I was quieter. Books, not parties. Polite. The kind of girl who everyone says is so nice, but they say it like a placeholder. Nice and forgettable. Growing up, the comparison was never loud. It didn't need to be. Claire got the sparkle. I got the shadow. She cried. They canceled dinner plans. I cried. They asked if I'd tried journaling. They never said I wasn't enough. They didn't have to. It was in the way my mother looked through me when Claire was in the room. It was in the way my father only remembered my birthday because Claire posted about it first. And yet, I still hoped. Even as an adult, I still clung to the fantasy that someday they'd surprise me. That if I did everything right, picked a good man, planned a beautiful wedding, chose the perfect dress, they would see me. Finally. But sometimes, you can live your whole life in a house and never notice there are no mirrors. James didn't walk into my life with fireworks. There was no dramatic music, no love at first sight movie moment. He just showed up, quietly, like peace. We met at a bookstore. I was in the wrong aisle. Looking for cookbooks, ended up in travel memoirs. He was sitting on the floor, flipping through a guide to Iceland. He looked up, smiled, and moved his bag without saying a word, like he'd been saving that space for me all along. We talked for 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. Not because it dragged, but because there was an ease I didn't know I was allowed to feel. He wasn't flashy, didn't try to impress me. He just listened. Really listened. We dated for 2 years. Slow, intentional. The kind of love that builds from the ground up. No whirlwind, no drama, just late-night walks, dumb inside jokes. His hand brushing mine at stoplights and always pulling back just slow enough to ask, "Are you okay?" James never made me feel like I was being compared to anyone. He didn't see me as Claire's sister or the quiet one. He just saw me. When he met my family, they didn't really see him. They smiled, said the right things, but there was a coldness beneath the politeness, like they were tolerating a side character in a story they'd already written without me. Claire joked, "He's cute but quiet. Kind of boring." My mom agreed too quickly, and I laughed because it was easier than saying, "He's the only person who's ever made me feel like I mattered." Still, I held on to hope. I thought maybe once they saw us together, once they felt how real it was, they'd warm up. That deep down, they'd be happy for me. And for a while, I let myself believe that. Because when James proposed, in that same bookstore aisle, kneeling awkwardly between travel guides and bargain bins, I said yes, with my whole heart. I believed this would be the turning point, the thing that brought everyone closer. That maybe finally, I'd get to feel what Claire must have felt her whole life. Like the sun had decided to shine, just for her. I didn't know yet. That even on my brightest day, they would still choose her storm. The day after we got engaged, I called my parents. I wanted to hear excitement in their voices, maybe even tears. Just something. My mom answered. I could hear dishes clinking in the background. She said, "Oh," like I had told her I'd bought new curtains, not like I was planning a life. She asked when the wedding might be. I told her spring. Her reply? "Oh, Claire's due around then." No congratulations. No, "We're so happy for you." Just Claire. Again. I laughed nervously. Tried to smooth the silence. Tried to shrink myself into a version that wouldn't sound too disappointed. "Well, we'll work around it," I said, as if my own wedding had become a variable in someone else's life equation. They said they'd talk to Claire, see what she was planning, and I let that be enough, because that's what I'd learned, to take the scraps, to shrink. James noticed. Of course he did. He never pushed, but he looked at me for a long time that night while we were washing dishes. Finally, he said, "You don't have to keep pretending that doesn't hurt." And I broke. Not into sobs, not into rage, just into silence. That kind of silence where the pain is so familiar, you almost don't notice it anymore. We planned the wedding ourselves. He took on more than his share, and I threw myself into details, flowers, menus, guest lists. Because if I stayed busy enough, maybe I wouldn't notice the quiet from my family. Claire didn't even ask what dress I'd chosen. My mom offered to help, once. But only if we kept it simple. Not too fancy, right? I mean, you're not trying to outshine Claire's baby shower. That sentence lodged in me like a splinter. Outshine. As if my love story was a spotlight I had stolen. I tried not to let it show. Tried to smile through the ache. Because somewhere deep down, a little girl in me still wanted her mother to say, "You look beautiful." But she never did. And even as I stood at my final dress fitting, staring at myself in layers of lace and soft ivory, the only voice I heard was Claire's, telling me not to upstage her baby bump. I whispered to my reflection, "This is your day too." But it already felt like I was borrowing it. The invitations went out, all of them, neatly sealed, carefully addressed. One by one, I placed them into the mailbox like I was mailing tiny pieces of my hope. And I waited. I told myself not to check every 5 minutes, not to expect a flurry of phone calls or sweet handwritten replies. But I did. Of course I did. James's family RSVP'd almost instantly. His mom cried over the phone, said she'd been praying he'd find someone gentle, someone good. His cousins offered to help with decorations. His brother asked what kind of cake we were having. And my family? Silence. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Nothing. So I called. Not with anger. Just that hollow kind of curiosity you get when you already know the answer, but hope you're wrong. Claire answered. Her voice was bright, distracted. I asked if she'd received the invitation. She said yes, but that things were getting hectic. I heard laughter in the background. A blender. Maybe my mom's voice. I asked if they were planning to come. There was a pause. A pause that stretched just long enough to prepare me for heartbreak. Then she said it. "Oh, I thought Mom told you. They won't be coming." "None of us, actually." I blinked, pressed the phone closer to my ear, like I hadn't heard it right. Claire laughed lightly, as if it were all so logical. "The baby shower is the same weekend, remember? It's just easier if everyone's here. Flights are expensive. You understand, right?" My mouth opened, but no words came. Because what do you say when someone you love tells you they're choosing balloons and cake over vows and a lifetime? I don't remember how the call ended, only that it did. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, hearing the echo of her voice in my head. You understand, right? And maybe that was the worst part, that I did understand. I understood exactly who I was to them. I wasn't the daughter getting married. I was the schedule conflict. When James came home, he found me still on the floor by the coffee table, invitation envelopes scattered like confetti at a party no one would come to. He knelt beside me. Didn't ask, didn't need to. I looked at him and said softly, "They're not coming." He pulled me into his arms, held me like the truth was wind, and I might blow away if he let go. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would still walk down that aisle. Still stand in front of the man who saw me. Still say, "I do," with every part of me. Even if I had to do it alone. The week before the wedding, I didn't cry. Not once. I folded napkins. I confirmed with the florist. I finalized the playlist and double-checked the seating chart, even though I already knew some seats would stay empty. It's strange how grief can make you efficient. Like your heart steps aside to let your hands finish the job. People asked if I was okay. I smiled, said all the right things. It'll be small, but meaningful. We're just excited to be married. And that was true. James was still my joy. But that week, I felt like I was standing on a stage where the audience had decided not to show up. The night before the ceremony, James and I stayed in separate rooms. Old tradition. It felt oddly symbolic. Like I was alone again. Just like always. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every wedding I'd ever seen on TV. The father walking his daughter down the aisle. The mother tearing up in the front row. And in my mind, I rewrote the scene. I imagined walking alone. I imagined the hush in the room as guests turned to see not a radiant bride, but a woman holding her own hand, because no one else offered theirs. It hurt, but it also clarified, because for the first time in my life, I stopped hoping they'd change. They had shown me, with stunning clarity, who they were willing to show up for. And it wasn't me. James's mother called that night. She asked if I needed anything. I almost said no. But something in her voice, warm, steady, broke through the dam I didn't know was still holding. I whispered, "Would you sit in the front row for me?" She didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart. I already planned to." And I cried, quietly, not out of pain, but out of release. The next morning, I slipped into my dress. No one zipped it up but me. No hands to adjust my veil. No camera flashes in the room. Just me, in the mirror. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt like a presence. Not an understudy. Not a shadow. But a woman who had waited her whole life to stop waiting for someone else's permission to be enough. I stood at the edge of the aisle. Alone. The music had already started. A soft piano melody James picked himself, He said it reminded him of early mornings and quiet promises. I didn't hear the notes. Not really. All I heard was my own heartbeat. People were turning, standing, smiling. I could feel the warmth in the room. But none of it came from the seats I had reserved in the front row on the left. Those seats were empty. All 6 of them. I didn't let my eyes linger. Didn't give those chairs the power to pull me apart. Instead, I looked straight ahead. At James. He was standing under a circle of soft flowers in late spring light. His eyes found mine, and he smiled. Not the big kind, not the showy kind. Just that quiet, steady smile that says I see you. And I'm still here. My legs moved before I could even think. One step, then another. No one beside me. No arm linked through mine. But I didn't stumble. Because somehow, in that moment, every footstep felt like a declaration. Not just, I do, but I am. I am worthy. I am whole. I am walking myself forward, not because I have to, but because I can. And the silence from my family? It couldn't compete with the sound of my own breath steady and sure as I crossed the threshold between who I used to be and the life I was choosing now. Halfway down, I caught a glimpse of James's mom. She had tears in her eyes, one hand to her chest, and in her lap, a tissue tucked between shaking fingers. I almost lost it, not from sadness, but from something that felt like being held without being touched. When I reached the altar, James took my hands. No one asked, "Who gives this woman away?" Because no one needed to. I gave myself. And in that moment, with the sun soft on my skin, the flowers gently swaying behind us, and 1,000 things unsaid between the guests and me, I knew I wasn't walking alone. I was walking forward, and that's not the same thing at all. The vows were ours, not borrowed from a book, not pieced together from cliches. We wrote them in the quiet of our apartment on mismatched scraps of paper, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with coffee gone cold beside us. James went first. His voice didn't tremble. It wasn't loud, but it filled the space, not with volume, with truth. He said things I didn't know I needed to hear, things no one else had ever said to me. Not my parents, not Claire, just him. He promised to stay. Not when it was easy, but when it was inconvenient. When I was hard to reach. When the world got too loud. And when he was done, he tucked his little paper back into his pocket and smiled like he'd just told the world a secret that only I would understand. I took a breath, felt the paper shaking in my fingers, but I didn't read it. Instead, I looked at him and spoke. I told him that he was the first person who ever looked at me like I wasn't a shadow, that his love didn't feel like lightning. It felt like sunrise, slow, steady, impossible to ignore once it's there. I told him I loved him on the loud days and the quiet ones, that he had taught me how to feel safe without needing to shrink. And when I finished, I didn't cry. Not out of control, at least, but the ache in my chest wasn't from pain. It was from finally being full. The officiant said the words. We said I do. Rings slipped on fingers with nervous hands and quiet certainty. The kiss was simple, software. No dramatic dip or applause, just warmth and peace. And when we turned to face the room, hand in hand, I didn't search the empty chairs. I didn't wonder what they'd think if they were here. Because this moment, this love, wasn't missing anything. It was whole. People clapped. James's mom stood first. His cousins followed. And in their faces, I didn't see pity. I saw pride. They weren't clapping for a perfect wedding. They were clapping for a woman who walked herself to the place she belonged, not because no one else would, but because she had something better now, a partner, a life. a love that didn't make her beg for space. The reception wasn't grand. No chandeliers, no seven-tiered cake. Just a garden strung with fairy lights and tables dressed in soft linen and wildflowers that looked like they were picked that morning. There was music, laughter, plates clinking, and under it all, something gentle, something honest. We danced, not a choreographed number, just arms wrapped around each other, feet occasionally stepping on toes, and smiles that said, "We made it." Our friends gave toasts, each one a little messier than the last, but full of heart. James's best friend cried through his. My college roommate told a story about a late-night phone call and how James stayed on the line for 2 hours because I'd forgotten how to breathe. And my parents' seats? Still empty. The candles flickered there, untouched wine glasses, chairs pushed in like no one ever meant to sit down. People noticed. Of course they did, but no one asked. I appreciated that, because sometimes silence is the kindest way to acknowledge pain. James's mom stood to give her toast. She held her glass high, her voice steady, but her eyes glistening. She didn't speak about me as someone James found. She spoke about me as someone they'd waited for, hoped for. She said I reminded her of the quiet women in stories who survive storms and plant gardens afterward. She said, "Today, our family grew, and it grew stronger." That was when I let the tears fall, not because I was sad, because someone had finally said it, out loud, that I belonged. Here. After the toasts, I stepped away for a moment, found a quiet bench under a tree lit with dangling golden lights. I watched everyone laughing, dancing, living, and I thought about how different it could have felt if I had let the absence overshadow the presence. I thought about how easy it would have been to call off the wedding, to let the heartbreak win, to believe, again, that I was too forgettable to celebrate. But I didn't. I chose joy. I chose presence. I chose the people who showed up instead of mourning the ones who didn't. That night wasn't flawless, but it was beautiful, because every smile, every song, every warm hand that reached for mine reminded me, you don't need a full table to feel full. You just need the right hearts around it. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to light pouring through the curtains. Soft, golden, the kind that makes everything look kinder than it really is. James was still asleep, his hand resting over mine, breathing slow and steady, like the world had finally given us permission to just be. I slipped out of bed, tiptoed across the room, and checked my phone. It was buzzing, not with congratulations, not with, "We're sorry we missed it." Number? It was Claire. She had posted a photo, a big one, balloons in soft pink and gold, a cake shaped like a baby bottle. Family members gathered around, laughing, hands on her belly, like they were holding the whole future in their palms. And the caption? "Family always comes first." My breath caught, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. There, in the middle of the photo, was my mother, smiling, one hand on Claire's shoulder, the other lifting a glass of champagne. My father was behind them, grinning like this was his crowning moment. I stared at that photo for longer than I should have, not blinking, not breathing. And what hit me, what stung more than anything, was the timing. She posted it the morning after my wedding, like it was a response, a statement, an underline to everything they hadn't said. Family always comes first. Except, I wasn't family. Not to them. I felt it in my bones, in the quiet between my ribs. That empty ache that doesn't come from loneliness, but from being erased. James stirred behind me, sat up slowly, asked if I was okay. I turned around, phone still in hand, held it up without speaking. He looked, brows furrowed, then softened. He reached for the phone, turned it face down on the nightstand, and pulled me back into bed. We didn't speak. He just held me. No fixing, no words, just warmth. And the quiet message that said, "You're not alone in this." Because sometimes there's nothing to say. Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you in the shadow of what could have been. And that's what James did. He didn't push me to forgive, didn't tell me it didn't matter. He just stayed. And in that stillness, I realized something. Their love, conditional, convenient, curated, might have shaped my past, but it wouldn't define my future. Not anymore. Grief doesn't always come after death. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a text message, a photo, a caption, a memory of something you hoped for and didn't get. The days after the wedding were strangely calm. James and I didn't go on a honeymoon. We stayed home, walked to the market, cooked together, talked in whispers at midnight, like we were still learning how to be married and didn't want to scare it away. I didn't hear from my parents, not a call, not even a forwarded email with congrats and a smiley face. Nothing. It was like the wedding had never happened. Like I had slipped off the edge of their world and they weren't planning to look down. Then, one afternoon, the silence broke. My phone buzzed. "Hey, Mom wants to call. Are you around?" It was from Claire. No apology, just logistics. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Sure." A few minutes later, my phone rang. I recognized the ringtone immediately. The one I used to answer in one ring. The one I used to feel grateful for. Now, it just sounded hollow. I picked up. My mother's voice came through, soft, almost timid. Like she knew she was walking into a fire, but hoped I hadn't lit it yet. "Sweetheart, we just wanted to check in. The photos looked beautiful." I said nothing, just waited. She continued. "We felt terrible missing it, but, it was just a really busy time for everyone. And Claire's first baby, you understand, right?" That sentence again. "You understand, right?" I took a breath, let the silence stretch, let her hear it. Then I said, "I do." "I understand perfectly." She tried to shift. Talked about how family was complicated, how timing was tricky, how they hoped to visit sometime soon. I let her speak. Because I wasn't going to beg. Not anymore. Then she said it. "We just didn't think it would hurt you so much." And something in me snapped, but not in rage, in clarity. I said, "That's the problem. You never think it will hurt me, because you've never seen me as someone who could be hurt. Just someone who would keep understanding, over and over, without asking for anything back. Silence. No defense, no argument, just quiet." She whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I didn't rush to forgive. I let the words hang, let them land where they should. Somewhere between truth and too late. We ended the call politely. She said she loved me. I said goodbye. And as I set the phone down, I realized something I hadn't dared admit until then. Sometimes the apology comes, but by the time it does, you've already learned to stop needing it. After that call, I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt still, like I'd walked out of a storm and realized the ground beneath me wasn't where I left it. Something had shifted. Not in them, in me. I stopped waiting, stopped refreshing my inbox for an apology letter that would never come. Stopped imagining Thanksgiving dinners where everything was magically okay. And in that quiet, in that space that used to ache, something surprising began to bloom. Peace. It didn't come all at once. It came in tiny pieces. A morning with hot coffee and no guilt. An evening walk with James, where we didn't talk about family, just clouds and dogs and dinner plans. A Saturday spent in the garden, digging into the earth with bare hands, planting marigolds and rosemary, and thinking, this is mine. James noticed it too. The way I started to laugh more freely. The way my shoulders didn't curl inward every time my phone buzzed. We talked about it once, on the couch, me curled up beside him with my legs across his lap. I said, it's strange. I always thought I needed them to change, to choose me, so I could finally feel okay. He looked at me, gentle as always, and said, you never needed them to choose you. You just needed to choose yourself. And he was right, because love, real love, doesn't make you earn it. It doesn't ask you to audition. It doesn't put you in a waiting room while someone else gets the spotlight. Love meets you where you are. Even if you're on a garden bench with dirt under your nails and old grief tucked behind your ribs, it looks you in the eye and says, you're enough. Just like this. I began to write again. Not just journal entries in the margins of my thoughts, but stories. Pieces of truth I hadn't dared put into words. One night, I wrote about walking down the aisle alone. I didn't make it dramatic. I made it quiet and honest. I shared it anonymously on a small platform. No names, no details, just emotion. And somehow, it found people. Women wrote to me, saying they too had empty chairs on their big days. That they too had family who forgot how to love out loud. That they too had walked themselves forward. We weren't alone. We just hadn't heard each other over the noise. And now, we were listening. Spring turned to summer. The marigolds bloomed. And so did something in me. Not revenge, not bitterness. Just roots. Soft, slow, and steady. Anchoring me to a life I had chosen without their permission. James and I built routines. Coffee on the porch. Grocery runs with ridiculous snack debates. Sunday evenings folding laundry to music from a decade neither of us remembered well. But we danced to it anyway. It was quiet, but not lonely. And then, they reached out again. Another message. This time from my father. Short, uncharacteristically direct. We'd like to visit, just for a day, if that's all right. No explanation. No pressure. Just that. I showed it to James. He read it slowly, then handed me back the phone. Didn't tell me what to do. Didn't say, you owe them nothing, or maybe give them a chance. He just said, whatever you choose, make sure it's for you. So, I said yes. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see if they knew what they were walking into. They arrived on a Thursday. Claire didn't come. The baby, they said, too small to travel. They brought flowers, store-bought, still wrapped in plastic. Lily something. My mother forgot I was allergic to those. We sat on the back porch. I made lemonade. My father commented on the fence paint. My mother asked if the marigolds were real. They talked around things. Weather, Claire's new house, traffic. I let them, until my mother finally said it. We miss you. I nodded. I know. She reached for my hand across the table, held it lightly, like it might break. We didn't realize how much it meant to you. The wedding, I mean. We thought you'd understand. There it was again. You'd understand. Like I was the designated absorber of hurt. The quiet one, the mature one, the one who never needed to be chosen. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, I do understand, but that doesn't make it okay. Silence again. Then I told them what they had missed. Not just the ceremony, but the moment I stopped waiting. The day I finally stood up, alone, and didn't fall. They listened. I think they really did. But I wasn't speaking for their benefit anymore. I was speaking for me. Because sometimes, healing isn't about who apologizes. It's about who you become after they don't. They left just before sunset. No dramatic hugs. No tearful goodbyes. Just a quiet, "Take care," and the sound of tires crunching down the gravel driveway. I stood by the screen door for a while, watched their car disappear behind the trees, felt the air shift back to stillness. James came out with 2 mugs of tea, handed me mine without a word. We sat on the porch steps. The sky was turning that deep, impossible blue that only lasts for a few minutes. The kind that reminds you how fast beauty passes if you're not paying attention. I took a sip, let it warm the space behind my ribs. Then I whispered, "It didn't fix anything." James nodded. "But it didn't break anything either." I added, that felt important to say. Because healing isn't always about mending. Sometimes it's just about building something new beside the wreckage, letting the ruins be what they are, and planting something anyway. Later that night, I pulled out the box of wedding photos. I had avoided them, not because they hurt, but because I was afraid of what I might not feel. I expected to see the empty chairs and wince. But I didn't. What I saw was light. The way it wrapped around me as I walked alone. The softness in James's eyes. The way our hands reached for each other like gravity had chosen us. I saw James's mom with her eyes red and shining. Our friends throwing flower petals and laughing. The garden lit up like a little world we built just for one day. And me, standing tall, not smiling for anyone's approval, not posing for anyone's pride, just being. I ran my fingers along one photo, the one taken as I reached the altar. In it, I'm alone, but I don't look small. I look free. There are moments in life when you realize you are never asking for too much. You are just asking the wrong people. And once you stop asking, you start building. That's what this whole year had been. Not about erasing the past, not even about forgiving it right away, but about learning how to exist without shrinking, to love without begging, to walk forward, even if no one's beside you, especially then, because there's a power in walking alone that no celebration can give you. It's the power of knowing you will never again hand your worth to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. Some endings don't arrive with a bang. They arrive like dusk, softly, slowly, until one day you notice you're no longer living in the same light. I never got the apology I thought I needed, not the rewritten version of my childhood, not the moment where they pulled me into their arms and said, "We were wrong, you matter." And strangely, I'm okay with that now. Because the girl who once begged to be seen learned how to stand in full view without asking for permission. This isn't just a story about a wedding, or an empty row of chairs, or even about family choosing someone else. This is a story about what happens when you stop waiting at a locked door and build your own house instead. It's about how love, real love, doesn't arrive with conditions. It shows up when no one else does. It stays when things get quiet. And it sees you not for who you've performed to be, but for who you really are. James and I still talk about that day sometimes. Not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of gratitude. Because walking alone down that aisle wasn't just the loneliest moment of my life. It was the most honest. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting the people who hurt you, but remembering yourself before they convinced you you were hard to love. So do you, whoever's listening in the dark right now. Maybe you have your own version of this story, your own empty chair, your own quiet heartbreak. Let me tell you something I had to learn the long way. You don't need everyone to clap for you to take up space. You don't need the people who left to return, just to begin again. You are already standing, already worthy, already more than what they refuse to see. And if no one walks beside you, walk anyway. Because the view from self-respect is far better than the view from approval. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. for letting this story unfold beside you. If it made you feel seen, even just a little, I hope you'll stay. There are more stories to tell. Stories of quiet strength, of imperfect love, of people who refuse to disappear. So maybe next time, you'll come back. Bring your blanket, your tea, your tired heart, and we'll sit together again, just like this, in the stillness, with the truth and the light we make for ourselves. Good night.